I'm Jeanette Francis. I'm 61 years old. I used to be known as Councillor Jenny Hall in Wallandilly Shire, A Ward, from 1995 to 1999 when I was illegally sacked by my fellow councillors. This is a very basic summary with quite a lot left out. This is basically the crux of the case. In 1982, I suspected a Freemason of indecent dealing with a 3-year-old. I went to Nowra, New South Wales Police. They refused to take my report of the attack on the basis that he knew the offender as a Freemason and the police officer himself was a Freemason, and so the police officer wouldn't take the report. But still he went ahead and told the suspected offender that I'd gone to police, and then I suffered retaliations as a result of that. In 1985, a friend of my dad, who was also a Freemason police officer, suicided over his guilt for his inaction. I'll say that again, his guilt for his inaction over my rather brutal rape in 1959 when I was 2 years old. So clearly I had no responsibility in that rape when I was 2. So he decided not to, this suicided Freemason had decided not to prosecute or file charges against the offender on the basis that his best mate who raped me was also a Freemason. So that's what Freemason allegiance means to Freemason police. They protect the offenders over and above the victims. That's how Australian criminal law works in this country. 1985, the suicide's son was a senior police detective. He held me personally responsible for his father's suicide, so he blamed me. So he embarked on a terror campaign against me, and he's the main cause behind all my surgical rapes ever since then. I submit. I suffered periods of being secretly drugged, sex raped and surgically raped. The evidence suggests that was Freemason retaliated. That was after 1985. In 1988, I caught a Freemason who I suspected in 1982 in the action of sexually assaulting a 3-month-old baby. I went to Camden, New South Wales Police. This happened in Camden, New South Wales. I went to Camden, New South Wales Police. They refused to take my report on the basis that they knew the offender was a Freemason and that they were all Freemasons. There was a gaggle of Freemason detectives gathered in Camden Court. They must have heard the news, I don't know, the person must have rang the police station and told them that I was on the way. Camden Hospital subsequently refused to take a rape swab kit on the baby on the basis that they said that only police can order that. And when I said that the police wouldn't do it because the offender was a Freemason, they said, well, we're not going to do it then. So the baby was denied justice, and the guilty party, the pedophile, the Freemason pedophile, got away because he was protected by pedophile Freemasons police. Camden, New South Wales long-term magistrate refused to hear my application for an apprehended violence order against the person who had raped the 3-month-old baby and who I'd suspected of raping the 3-year-old child. The magistrate refused to take my application through the court on the basis that he and the alleged offender had both been Freemasons at the Camden Freemason Lodge Temple, and so therefore he dismissed my application from court because the alleged offender was a Freemason. The baby rapist kidnapped my 14-year-old son later in 1988. I went to Camden Police to report the kidnap. Camden Police told me that they would not take the report on the basis that the pedophile kidnapper was a Freemason. Commonwealth Centrelink later paid that pedophile Freemason child endowment, because that's what they called it at the time, later paid them child endowment to keep my abducted 14-year-old child. In 1989, Brothers in Arms was published that had contributions from many police, probably up to 100 police in Sydney. Most of them were police detectives. And inside the book was a photo of me. And I was described as a biker mole, a girl who was an associate of outlaws, who had been underage drinking at a pub when she was murdered by one of the bikers. And subsequently the book says that the person accused of murdering her suicided in jail because somebody had sent him a Valentine's Day card with the girl's name on it. So the only comparison that I could say with my life to that story is my only association with criminals was with Freemason criminals who were also police, and they refused to do their job and report crime on the basis of their own criminal allegiances to the fraternity of Freemasons. So one of the criminal Freemasons included in the book was Sydney Detective Bob Bradbury, and I submit that he was responsible for stealing my photograph to be published in that book, to pervert the course of justice and cause me a campaign of criminal defamation that's lasted these last 30 years on the basis that he was my neighbour who lived a couple of hundred yards from me in the Oaks. I lived in 39 William Street. He lived in 39 or 41 Mary Street. So he lived in the Oaks and used to be friends with my partner Owen Hall, who used to traffic pornographic videos across to Detective Bob Bradbury, and I believe Bob Bradbury stole my photo for the purpose of illegally publishing it in the book. So after the book was published, I suffered a period of secretly drugged and sex rapes and surgical rapes, and the evidence suggested that that was Freemason related also. In 1994, police detective from Brothers in Arms, this one's named, or another one named in Brothers in Arms book, this one had the surname Shields. He threatened to have me arrested. He brought two uniformed police with him, came into my Toastmasters meeting, and the uniformed police pulled their police pistols and pointed them at me, and Detective Shields was threatening me to produce identification because he opened the book and showed me the photo and said, "That's a photo of you. We all believe that's a photo of you," referring to everyone in Toastmasters meeting who I hardly knew, "and we believe you faked your own death." Soon after, in 1994, Camden, New South Wales, police detective Paul Fryer claimed pornographic videos were being distributed from my shop. I had a custom built computer and repair shop, and he claimed I was distributing pornographic videos from my shop. Well, I submit that Detective Bob Bradbury was the one who had been responsible for distribution of the pornographic videos around the police department, and he claimed that I was distributing them from my shop because he was in partnership with my partner Owen Hall to secretly drug me and rape me and produce some of these videotapes, and potentially secretly drug and rape my children to produce the videotapes. So I was never actually given confirmation of what was in the videotapes. I had hundreds of people tell me that these videotapes existed. I placed a $10,000 reward in a newspaper, and the police intervened and stopped me from getting any replies to that. In 1995, I was elected onto council when I was extensively surgically raped on the basis that I had faked my own death in the Brothers in Arms book. Anybody that had communication with me was eventually convinced that I was this biker mole in this book, and they actually believed that I had faked my own death. By 2003, I was now being threatened with arrest if I continued to complain that my photo was in the BIA Brothers in Arms book. I call it BIA Brothers in Arms book, because Detective Bernie Ryan from Goulburn, New South Wales Police said the photo wasn't the photo of me after all, contrary to what all the hundreds of other people had said to me and all the assaults that I'd suffered because of it. So he said if I continued to insist that that photo was a photo of me, he would arrest me. So in 2006 I was face to face with enough evidence to convince me to stop denying that I'd been surgically raped. And by 2013, despite the fact that I had evidence in MRI, the medical industry was refusing to acknowledge that the evidence was there. So by 2013, South Australian Health Minister and the Police Department, SAPOL, officially deemed that I was schizophrenic and delusional, and for claiming my photo had been stolen in the Brothers in Arms book, and for thinking that I had implants, because they reckon I had no grounds to claim that I had implants. So they locked me up under the Mental Health Act because they never managed to manufacture a criminal charge against me, because I'm a bloody perfect citizen and an outstanding Australian. It needs a book actually, but I really do need this rental. It was owned by a police family with the surname Allen. I rented through real estate in Picton. When I was in that residence, I woke up one morning to discover puncture wounds in the top of my head and my nose. The puncture wounds in my head were about here, which is about there. And if you feel there now, you can feel ridges. There's other ridges at the back of my head too, which they weren't there before. And in these both areas, I feel movement under the skin. I feel sparking, electrical sparking. I feel pain. Sometimes it feels like up here, it feels like drilling. And I always feel a headache. I never not have a headache. And I have tinnitus or ringing in the ear in my left ear only. I feel what feels like claws down the side of my head and down this side as well, but more down this side. Down the back of my ear, I feel where I hear all the ringing. I hear the ringing in the back of my ear. I can't hear it this one. When it first started, I kept turning around wondering what that was behind me. I feel pain down the back of my neck where the cables go, and these places I believe are cables. Cable goes, there's an indent in my forehead there, and the cable goes down the left side of my forehead over my left side of my nose that intermittently weeps a white viscose fluid across here to my cheek, which intermittently goes infected to my ear. There's a cable over my ear, you can see from the outside, comes down my bottom jaw into my lips, cable both sides of the lips. I can feel it in there, and where it exactly goes from there I'm not sure. I have cables on my gums, specifically a finer one, and I've got an MRI scan which actually shows greater detail, and it looks like smudge marks in the back of my head. And down the back of my head, it's actually quite painful to touch all the time. It actually aches quite a lot. And there's a lot of heat generated by whatever's under the skin. It's very painful for my hair on the scalp. If I can't wear my hair down outside, because if the wind blows it, it actually is really, really painful. It feels like I'm being stabbed. They lasted for the majority of time that I was on council as a council representative. I felt I should have been protected while I was on council. So a lot of the assaults happened while I was actually physically taking part in council activities. Some of the surgical rapes involved drilling. As I said, the cables went in my lips. My lips were swollen when they went in, and I had drill holes, tiny circular holes in the corner of my mouth. These holes were created a few times as if they were continuing to do a considerable bit of work. So I had 2 drill holes underneath my chin which have left scars. You can't necessarily see the scars there, but you certainly can under my chin. A small item, like the size of a grain of rice, as they call one particular implant item, is in my gum. I woke up one morning and found that under a bloodied flap of skin, and that tends to pulsate a lot. It was actually pulsing really hard on my jaw, like vibrating really hard on my jaw. And if anybody knows anything about your jaw, if you get a lot of pain on your jaw, it can actually affect you psychologically. So I went to a number of doctors to get a resolve to try and stop the vibrating, and they wouldn't do it, and I knew it was linked to the cable on my bottom jaw, so I cut through the cable, and on the basis that, I'll finish that. I cut through the cable, and immediately the vibration on the jaw stopped. Vibration stopped, and then a number of years later in South Australia, this all happened in New South Wales, a number of years later in South Australia, on the basis that I cut through the cable in my jaw, psychiatrists in Adelaide, in the Flinders Hospital, decided that was a good reason to have me detained under the Mental Health Act, because I was a danger to myself. So they consider me doing a dentist-like procedure on my jaw to stop the vibration as a danger to myself, but they don't consider the fact that their fellow medical practitioners refuse to identify these implants. They don't consider that a danger to me. They're the ones that should be locked up under criminal law. Fuck the Mental Health Act. They should be locked away as criminals. When I had these radiology scans, I made sure I waited for the reports. So I had the CT or the MRI. I never come back for it. I always sat in the waiting room and waited for them to write the report and took the scans away with me. So I made sure that there was no interference. I did that intentionally so I could be 100% certain there was no interference. So whoever did the scan wrote the report, and there was no exchange of people. And as I said, that appears to be the cable across the ear, and these lines appear to be what's the claws that I feel from my temple, and that is the cable up the back there, and that's the cable up the top there where all the smudge is, and that's the cable going around to the forehead. That's the top of the head. That's where I had the injury, so that's the point of insertion, I would say. That looks like the area where I had the open wound in 1997 at Wilton. I also feel swelling and pulsing up here as well, where the smudges are. And now I think there's cable that goes down my throat, but I'm unclear on radiology at that. So I can say for certain these marks around my ears would be cables. That's where I feel the pulsating, and you can see that they're lines, they're abnormal, and so is these, and so is that, and so is that. These are not normal. The Benson radiologist decided not to report on it on the 5th of May 2006 at the Ashford Medical Centre, Anzac Highway, Adelaide. The 5th of April 2006. So this evidently was the month before. I'll keep it upside down. This is a CT scan. What I like about this CT scan is all of the CT scans are like that. They're just a big circle of nothing. So what's the point? To prove that I haven't faked the reports, is to show this is the original piece of paper. It goes in and out of focus. It's auto-focusing. It says there's nothing wrong. From Benson Radiology on the 5th of May, where it is it? 2006. Look through the camera, I can't see it. See those cables on my head? See? Lines. Makes it look like a square end there. They're cables on the top of my head. Hasn't been reported in the report. I've got a still image of this one. I think I put the Melbourne University picture over it on the main page. But I'll include this in this. I'll include the still image in this video. It looks like cables. This one's on the 5th of April 2006, the month before. Dr. Jones and partner. Okay, CT head. Says nothing's wrong, everything's fine. So everything appears normal. The sinuses, even though it's constantly blocked from the tubes. This is another CT scan done on the 28th of June 2011 in the government, in a government facility. It was under the label of Dr. Jones and Dr. Perrott. Let's see if we can see this. Once again, because of the equipment, you can't see that well here. You might have to just see it. On the top of the head, like the MRI, you can see that white space on top of my head. That's the smudges in the MRI. I should have picked that up as abnormal on the edge of the head. As I did say, I can feel vibrations, and I told them where I could feel them. And you can see, I can see very clearly that white space on top of the head. And it's very interesting, this very white mark right in the middle here. I don't know if that's normal, but it's a very white mark. And you can see the white down the back of the head as well. These are the smudges. These are the smudge area on the MRI in June 2006. And you see it comes up to a lesser degree in the CT, but it's still depicted. And it hasn't been pointed out. And I told them the vibrations were there. I told them I could feel the vibrations. And that's where I could feel them. You can see it all up the top there on that one. And that was ordered through I went to an Aboriginal health centre on purpose, just to see if they had any better access to medical services. Clearly they don't. So the fight's for everyone, not just for white Australians. June 2011, done by the radiologists in the Noarlunga Hospital. So I went to the Aboriginal Family Clinic. I'm not Aboriginal, but I just went there because I wanted to see if they got any better health services, or if they were up shit creek like the rest of us, and clearly they are.